We need to fund this government, and we also need to raise the debt ceiling. Should you not put the two together?
Well, you could, but it'll be impossible. They'll get another 3-week extension. That'll run right into the debt ceiling. The Treasury will be out of cash in early March. Then yesterday, the Treasury said we're going to have to borrow, get this, $617 billion in the next 5 months, which means they'll need a $21 trillion debt ceiling by June 30th, which I don't know where the votes are coming from, frankly.
So are we headed towards disaster?
We're heading towards disaster because when we get to October 1, that's fiscal 2019, remember, this is year 10 of an business expansion that at that point will be the longest in history. They're ballooning the debt to $1.2 trillion. In other words, the tax cut is going to whack their revenue by $280 billion.
Right.
They inherited $700 billion. They're adding $100 billion to appropriations, defense and non-defense. They have this huge disaster thing to fund. Trump promised he's going to bail out the Obamacare insurance subsidies. When you put that all together, now here's the point. For the first time in history, the Fed is pivoting to QT, quantitative tightening, shrinking the balance sheet.
So that's the new aspect to all of this.
It's totally different because they're going to be selling $600 billion worth of bonds in fiscal 2019. At the same time, the Treasury's borrowing $1.2 trillion.
But David, I'm having a very strong sense of deja vu all over again because I feel like we were in the same spot several years ago talking about the debt ceiling and talking about stopgap funding during the Obama. I feel like we were having the same conversation, and again, what happens is that Washington pulls through at the last moment. Why is this time any different?
First of all, you have a different president. You have a Congress that is totally fractured and dysfunctional. But more importantly, even if they find some way to paper it over, my point is about economics. My point is that you're going to have bond market carnage like you've never seen before because this late in the business...
Do you think we're starting to see it right now with the yields going up?
Yeah, but this late in the business cycle, no one has ever tried to borrow $1.2 trillion, 5% of GDP, when the Fed is selling bonds. So the point I was making is $1.8 trillion worth of Treasury bonds are going to have to be absorbed by someone because for the first time the Fed and the Treasury are both selling. Huge. And I don't think anybody has figured out how that's going to happen.
Yeah.
It won't happen at 2.5 or 2.6% on the 10-year.
Yeah.
If it goes to 3.5, what does that mean? It means a 30% loss for anyone who bought the Treasury a few weeks ago. That means that the whole financial system is going to go through a big reset. You can't have a 30% loss in the core bond market
and not have that turn into
upsetting everything. Yes.
David, it's Yvonne in Hong Kong. I mean, we keep asking where the fiscal hawks are, but does this make that infrastructure is going to be a much tougher sell?
I don't think it's ever going to see the light of day because before long they will be stumbling into this 3-week at a time continuing resolution for most of this fiscal year. They may increase the debt ceiling temporarily or suspend it for a few months. But I can predict with almost certainty that will not see the light of day because the Republican Freedom Caucus and the few hawks that are left are going to be horrified when they see how much they have to raise the debt ceiling and how much we're going to be borrowing. No one has ever thought we're going to borrow $1.2 trillion after we've had a 10-year recovery and we're at full employment. That's crazy. Maybe you do at the bottom of the business cycle, but not 10 years into an expansion.
David, PIMCO is saying that the U.S. is winning when it comes to a currency war. Is that the new dollar policy coming out from the Trump administration, do you think?
Well, I think they have no idea what their dollar policy is. Trump is a low-interest man. The Secretary of the Treasury is clueless when it comes to fundamental fiscal and monetary matters. But the point is, there is no virtue in trashing the dollar. I think it's near the bottom of this, 15% decline we've had in the last year.
Right.
But if we continue with this, it'll only raise the CPI, the inflation rate domestically, dramatically and create even more of a dilemma for the Fed.
Okay, just really quickly, I want to just pull up a chart here. G#BTV6636, which shows we're closing out one of the strongest months since March 2016. If everything is as terrible as you're saying, if President Trump is as bad as you're saying, why are the markets up?
Because the markets are delusionary.
Oh, God.
No, this has nothing to do with discounting any future. This is day trading. This is machine trading. This is robo traders.
This is not on fundamentals.
And it has nothing to do with fundamentals. The markets have been broken by the Fed, and until they hit something that's pretty...
Earnings have nothing to do with this, David?
No, earnings, look, earnings are going to come in at $110 a share for 2017. In 2014, it was $106 a share. So in 3 years, you've gone up 2%. This is the only thing that's going on here is a rebound after the deflationary drop we had in 2015 and 16. This isn't any sign that they're going to keep growing at any kind of rate. And if yields go over 3%, which they will, then the economy is going to go through another whole adjustment, like the housing market. Okay. What's going to happen to the whole refi business when all of a sudden everybody out there can't refi their mortgage because they already got the best rate they're ever going to get? Lots of problems cropping up.
Yeah, certainly. Another one, of course, is this Russian investigation. David, I know you've called this a witch hunt, despite the fact that you are anti-Trump, but what can we get out of this memo? Is this enough ground for the president to actually fire Mueller?
Well, I wish he would, but he's being cautioned not to because it would cause a firestorm in Washington, and I remember all the way back to Nixon times when I was there as a young guy at Capitol Hill. But the point is, this Russia thing is nonsense. There's no evidence, and if there was evidence, they would have NASA would have it on their intercepts, and it would have leaked long ago.
Yeah.
So this is basically the Democrats trying to relitigate an election they lost against one of the worst, weakest candidates that they could ever come up against because their candidate was even weaker. This is really dangerous. We need to be finding rapprochement with Russia. We can't afford a $700 billion defense budget. We don't need one. We don't need to have a confrontation with Russia. But the Democrats and the progressives and liberals have become the war hawks and warmongers of the present era. Everything's upside down. And if you think Washington is a reliable partner for Wall Street and the economy, you got to think again.